Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I'm excited to get started. It's a fresh week, fresh day of training. Let me go ahead and turn my scrolling captions off there. Hold on. You would think this is my first time using the tool, but it's not. Hey, I want to say thank you to those showing up early and on time. I really appreciate it when you do that, when you engage in the chat. That's getting the community going. This is your community. It's not my community, right? It's our community. And when you engage in the chat, you're making people feel like this is a community that they're welcome in, a place where government contractors can come and succeed. So let me give you a tip for success for those showing up early and on time. And this is an old favorite of mine that goes back decades for my sales career. And the whole idea around networking is to dig your well before you're thirsty. Dig your well before you're thirsty. And there's an old book by that same title by Harvey Mackay, but he talks about, and it should make sense, right? Don't dig a well down to the water to try to find water when you're thirsty. Do it before you're thirsty so the water's there when you need it. And networking is the same thing. Make sure you're digging your well before you're thirsty. Make sure you're out there building relationships with other government contractors. Literally right here in the chat, you could be doing that, right? Also with government personnel, whether they're small business professionals, acquisition personnel like contracting officers, or program office personnel. Get out there, start building those relationships that you're not going to need in 30 days, but you're going to need in 30 weeks, or next year and the year after. You start building those relationships, they'll really come back to help you out. So remember, today's tip is dig your well before you're thirsty. That was just a quick way to say thank you for those showing up early and on time. If it makes sense, by the way, what I'm saying, that tip, just say dig your well in the chat. It'll make everybody else who comes late wonder what the heck we were talking about, right? All right, let me get into my slides and we'll be off to the races. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about what we government contractors sometimes are doing wrong, and I'm going to give you what you can do instead. Lessons learned are only lessons learned when the lessons are learned. I'm not sure if I can repeat that 3 times, but hopefully you get my point, right? Lessons learned are only learned if you learn those lessons that come out of the challenges and mistakes. And that seems obvious. But the key thing is, and related to today's training, you don't have to make your own mistakes. You don't have to learn from your own mistakes, or at least you don't have to learn from the mistakes that you're making that we all made before you. I want you to learn from my mistakes and from many of the companies that have gone before you. Many of us try to share our mistakes out there. And these are mistakes, not just in a flat out, I accidentally put too much salt into the cake batter or whatever, right? That's an error, mistake. What I mean is, should I put salt in the first place? And I go, no, don't put salt in, put something else in. And I don't know anything about making cakes. So maybe you're supposed to put salt in there. Somebody tell me whether I'm supposed to put salt in the cake. But that's the type of mistakes I want you to avoid, ones that we have made in government contracting that you don't have to. And I wanted to give you a quick little example of one that I ran into that I've been teaching people ever since I ran into the mistake, and I certainly have been teaching it the last 7 years. And this relates to a contract I went out after in my last company. And I went after a contract in the White House. And I'll talk about the White House more in a minute. But I went after this contract in the White House, and we really liked it. It was in our sweet spot, et cetera. And but one of the challenges was the Corps was trying to force us, or looking back, they were intimidating us to hire the incumbent personnel. What happened was there's another contractor who was in there, and their employees had made friends with the government employees. And so they were trying to convince the government to make them just switch contract companies. But what I told the government is I didn't want that person. We interviewed them. We didn't like it. We didn't think they were up to speed at the level we wanted, and we thought we had to deliver for our customer. And so long story short, I refused that contract. It was a $5 million contract. And I refused it to the contracting officer. I called her up and I said, look, this is everything we would want, but I'm not going to sign the contract and accept it because the Corps and the program office people, they're forcing us to hire the incumbent personnel. And this is the lesson learned that I figured out, right? The mistake I want to share with other people was that she said, no. The contract is between me and you guys. They don't have a say. They can send their requirements up, but they already did that, and I chose the winner, right? They can't tell you which personnel are on there. Your job is to deliver as you said you would in your contract or when you sign the contract. But the minute she said that, what I realized, among many other things, is that you don't have to accept what the government says, people in the government says, as carte blanche. You could sit there and go back to them and say, well, can we talk about it? Can we do something different? And they are open to conversations. And that was something simple. Sometimes when we're small, we make the mistake of thinking we can't argue or discuss the options because we don't want to be put on some bad list of, oh, Neil's company is difficult or something, right? And so that's an example of lessons learned that we have out there. So I want to go down deeper today into federal contracting, things that are being done wrong, right? And I want you to stop doing it wrong. I'm going to cover down on 3 sections today about stop doing government contracting wrong and give you suggestions on what you can do instead. I'm not just going to say this is wrong and good luck. I'm going to say this is what you're doing. I'd recommend you do this instead. But the 3 phases I want to cover down on this are, the first thing is this understanding, are you busy or are you productive? Those are 2 entirely different things. People sometimes mistake activity for productivity. They're not the same thing. And so we're going to talk about that. Then I want to talk about another big thing I think we sometimes make a mistake doing in government contracting is prime contracts. And I say prime contracts are the siren song. And I'll walk through and talk about what I mean there. But they can be very bad for us sometimes at certain stages. They certainly can be not the right choice at certain stages. And so we'll talk about that. And then I'm going to wrap up with this mistake of acting like a billion-dollar company when you're not one. And we'll dive into this, but I used to use this line that I'm a billion-dollar company, revenue's not recognized. People used to like it. I was all proud of that line. And then the more experienced I got, the more I realized that was just the wrong thing, not only to be saying, but the wrong way to be leading my company and myself, because it made me do things that were counter to what I should have been doing at that stage. And so we'll talk about that. That's what we're going to cover down on today, those 3 main mistake areas. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I am the co-founder of the GovCon in a Box and president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. And I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process, A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. And if that's something you get and you understand, you've been to my training before, just put in here, process rocks, because literally the foundation of my training is process rocks, right? Government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. So put that in the chat, process rocks. Okay, 2 quick homework things or housekeeping. One is, if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, Government Contracting Success Newsletter, do so. We're constantly putting out good content. Today, I put out a newsletter talking about HHS. They have a supplier portal. I give you the exact tips for getting in there. The last time we shared this out, we added 500 new small businesses to HHS's supplier portal. And so I'm hoping today and tomorrow we'll see the same kind of results. A lot of companies realizing, oh, I'm not in HHS's supplier portal. Let me get in there really quick. Literally takes 2 minutes, and that's the type of information we share on in the newsletter. And the next thing is, you see over on the right-hand side, it says next training. Today is August 5th, so tomorrow's training is 3 simple steps for 8-8 GovCons. So if you haven't registered, go ahead and register for that. We have over 150 people registered for today's training, which I am very appreciative of. But when you register, you're letting us know and others in LinkedIn know that the training exists and they should come check it out. I wanted to just do a quick congratulations to the newest member of the 100 Club. This is Electronics Solutions, Germaine Isaac. So Germaine joined the 100 Club in GovCon in a Box last week on Friday, I think. And what this means is that in GovCon in a Box, we have stood up a tool that allows you to see your federal visibility score. And so Germaine and all these other companies that you see ahead of Germaine and Electronics have gone in and just made sure that your SAM and DSBS are maximized visibility so the federal buyers can find you. That literally is what it is. It's not a proprietary database of ours. We're just telling you what needs to be fixed, and it's free. So I wanted to welcome Germaine and Electronic Solutions into the 100 Club and encourage you to go check out GovCon in a Box. Okay, let's get started with one of my favorite, right? Not confusing activity with productivity. And so the question I want you to ask, and I'm going to remind you at the end, I want you to ask yourself when you're looking at anything you're doing, me including this live training that I'm doing, am I just being busy or am I being productive? Can I see how what I am doing will lead to where I want to go? Or am I just doing things for the sake of doing it? So my first example here is with meetings, going to any meeting with federal buyers, meeting with industry partners, large, small businesses, etc. When you take the time to have a meeting scheduled, you work hard to get it scheduled, you're investing your time and maybe your colleague's time, you're investing the other person's time into that meeting. Are you going in and just having meetings, or are you moving the sale forward? We sometimes describe this in a meeting as having a great meeting or having a successful meeting. A great meeting is when you're in there and everybody's listening to everybody. We're sharing decks, we're talking, we're kind of nerding out on whatever the topic is, the jargon we're sharing, etc. But it doesn't go anywhere. A successful meeting does some of that element, but drives towards a particular objective that moves the sale forward. An example could be a follow-on meeting, or it could be information about a particular opportunity we're trying to get, who the person is that might be evaluating it, or some of their challenges, like that specifically could also be a tangible step forward in the sale. If it's with teaming partners, it could be something like an NDA signed or an NDA sent back and forth. You need to make sure that you're moving the sale forward when you go to meetings, and you're not just having meetings for meeting's sake. That's the difference between activity and productivity. So the second one that I have here, second example is, are you meeting people or are you building relationships? And this kind of goes with conferences. It could also go with those meetings I just mentioned, but it could be events. You go to a vendor outreach session, you go to somebody's doing a happy hour, whatever it is. Are you going in and just meeting many, many people? I used to talk to folks who would come away from a conference and like, wow, look at the stack of cards. And for those younger people in our training, business cards used to be something people had. But they would come out and say, look at this stack of cards. I got 2 stacks. I literally would watch a guy go to a conference and have them all over his desk. And that's cool and all, but all you're doing is meeting a bunch of people. I see people do this on the internet sometimes where there's a lot of selfie pictures, and I'm like, that's cool. You're meeting people. That's the start of a relationship. But are you building relationships? Are you limiting the amount of people you're trying to build a relationship with? I advise you to build 16 strategic relationships, 24 relationships outside the industry, but 16 in industry. So 8 small, 8 large, and the other 8 is with the agency you're targeting. But those relationships take a lot of time to work on. But when you think about it, are you really building any relationships at all? Relationships are strategic relationships in particular. They're focused on mutual growth. Whether it's with you and the buyer or you and a teammate, it's still mutual growth. With the buyer, it's just sharing information, perhaps back and forth. But you want to make sure that you're building relationships. And so if you go to a conference, if you go to an event, if you're just cold calling a bunch of people, don't just do it for the sake of having a bunch of numbers saying, I met all these people. Your goal is to build relationships that will last, relationships that will help you hear about opportunities, relationships that will lead to revenue. Literally, relationships can lead to revenue. You've heard people say this before. It's not what you know, it's who you know. That's not totally accurate, but the phrase is out there. And it's because people believe so strongly that it's important that a lot of people know you and that you know a lot of people in a strong relationship way. They know you. They don't just know of you. Hopefully that makes sense. Meeting people is activity. Building relationships is productivity. Make sure you understand activity versus productivity. So the last example I wrote here, and this one relates to proposals, right? When you think about proposals that you're sending out, are you just a proposal machine shop, right? Is your company just spewing out proposals? Or are you writing winning proposals? And this, again, is the difference between activity and productivity. Activity is just having a machine. We've got these AI tools coming out that are writing proposals. Even we're building one, right? And so this idea that our AI can really rapidly push out proposals. But what a lot of people do is just they push it out, whether it's a person or an AI tool, they're just pushing out responses. They're sending out 20, 30, 40 a month. It's just an amazing, staggering amount. My thing is write 4 a month. And people used to say that was a lot, right? but I want you to write 4 winning proposals. What this means is you're only writing a proposal that you can win. The government might award it to another company who also could win because they also are a really good competitor to you. But at least you're writing a winning proposal and you're not just spewing out responses out there. And so when you think about your activity around the writing side of the house, the proposal side of the house, make sure you're writing winning proposals, productivity, versus sending out responses for the sake of responses. That's just activity. It will not lead to revenue. Winning proposals will absolutely lead to revenue. And I just put this in. This is it's actually a personal pet peeve of mine, but it's just a personal way that I look at this, that the biggest sign that I am or you might be, right, focus more on the activity than the productivity is when we talk about how busy we are and how hard we're working. You don't realize how hard I'm working. I don't care how hard you're working. What we care about is how efficiently you're working. Are you getting things out the door that will help you and help your company? And that's why I want you to really ask yourself, are you being busy or are you being productive? Okay, so let's talk about prime contracts. A whole different way I think that we're sometimes wasting our time and things that we should change, right? And I, of course, don't mean not to pursue prime contracts. Yes, pursue prime contracts when it makes sense. The part I'm talking about is when it doesn't make sense, and that's what I'm going to go into. I put in it's a siren song from Greek mythology, and the whole idea of it, right? I learned of this mostly from sailors on the seas and pirates sailing everywhere, where they'd hear a siren song and they'd run into the rocks, kind of thing. Well, that's literally kind of the example of what a prime contract could be. You're running your ship, your company onto the rocks of government contracting when we're hearing the prime contract siren song. It's an enticing appeal. It's hard to resist that, oh, look at that prime contract, right? I should go after that. That's $20 million or something, or I can hit these big wins. And it's very tempting, but the problem is it can be harmful in the long run. And it can be harmful in so many different ways, right? One of the best ways it can be harmful is that you win. Well, if you win prime contracts before you're ready, then sometimes you're dealing with all sorts of issues, like the delivery side, keeping your employees happy, hiring people, paying people when the government doesn't pay on time. I don't want to discourage you from doing that because you just team with somebody and figure out the right way. But the problem is that's the best thing that can happen. The worst thing is that you're spinning your wheels, pursuing prime contracts that you really don't have a chance to win. And one of the ways you can figure out that you don't have a chance to win, or your chances are reduced. I never want to say you can't have the exception, but the average, the norm is that you're not going to win contracts if you don't have relevant past performance. And so pursuing a prime contract when you don't have relevant past performance is basically a recipe for disaster, or a recipe for a no-win at the very least, right? And what I mean by relevant past performance, I mean, if you're going after a federal agency, then you should have past performance that is in that scope of work that you're doing. An example, my last company, we did SharePoint. We would go after SharePoint opportunities. And I could go toe-to-toe with Microsoft because we had always, at any given time, active 3 past performances in SharePoint that were huge, really good examples. We got those because we built them up from really small SharePoint examples, but it was always SharePoint examples coming up that we had past performance as subcontractor and then as prime contractor, but it was always SharePoint. And so that's a relevant past performance related to the scope of work. The next one is if you're trying to go into a new agency and you haven't been there before, even larges do what I'm about to say. We go in and we try to get some traction as a subcontractor first, and get some past performances as a sub in that agency. So when we come back and we say, hey, we want a prime, we've got some prime past performance, but more importantly, we've got some agency relevant experience that tells the agency, hey, we're familiar with how you guys do business over here. So pursuing with no relevant past performance is not really the right path. And really, I want to encourage you to subcontract instead. Get out there, find companies in the Army as an example. I was just having a conversation with somebody this morning who I hope begins to work with us, but they want to go after the Army and they don't have any real past performance in there. It's like, okay, let's help you figure out how to build the relationships that will lead to subbing. Once you sub, then you can come right back around like in 6-12 months and look at priming maybe at the end of next year. When you can make that decision and you're comfortable with avoiding the siren song of prime contracting, then you really start embracing subcontracting and you realize there's tons of companies who would love to work with you for your core competency, your expertise. The other thing I put in here is spending time on one big proposal instead of many subs is the problem with prime contracts, right? Being that siren song. And I know Gus and Cecilia are going to tell me I'm saying siren song too many times, but sometimes I just latch on to words. But anyways, think about if you have been working on prime contracts, they're a lot of work, especially if you're trying to do all the writing yourself. It gets into days and weeks, and you're really trying to make it perfect. Especially if you're inexperienced, you're going to spend a lot more time on the proposal than usual. Now, generally, you can write one at a time. Maybe if you're really good, you write two, but you're not writing any more than two. But literally, if you had 16 relationships with larges and smalls, if it makes sense to have a large relationship, only if it makes sense, you can be participating on their prime contracts as they're going after opportunities. You can participate, and your writing efforts are not only 1, 2, 3 pages at most, but they tend to be the exact same thing because you're like, hey, we're going to do painting or we're going to do data analytics, and we're going to try to find those opportunities our teammates are going after that we can fill that one task area. And if you're comfortable with it, well, now you can write multiple opportunities at the same time without much of a lift. And it actually becomes far less tough on your company, especially on you. So anyways, that goes back to this whole idea of back off from the prime contracts. If you're not ready, you really have to ask yourself, are we ready for prime time? If not, you can be ready a year from now. Government contracting is a 10 and 20-year play unless you think you're going to sell it fast. It's a 10 or 20-year play, so you can prime a little later, months out, years out. But right now, if you subcontract, you get revenue, you learn, and you get past performances within the agencies that you're trying to support. By the way, a quick thing is just remember in the chat, let people know who you are. Tell them your company name, your core competency, where you're at. This isn't just training. I bring this together so that you can network with each other. There's over 100 people in training today. There's more than 150 people are registered. So let people know who you are. I'll keep training, but you go ahead and let each other know who you are. At the beginning of today's training, I said I'm a $1 billion company, revenue not yet recognized was my tagline for my last company. And it was it wasn't the stupidest decision I made because I made a lot of dumb decisions sometimes, but it was a bad decision, right? I made this the motto. I would go into staff meetings saying, hey, we're a $1 billion company. Revenue is not yet recognized. We're big. We operate like them. We're as good as them, but we just don't have the contracts yet. We just don't have the revenue yet. Well, that's not a good idea for many reasons. First off, because I wasn't a $1 billion company. So why was I pretending to be a $1 billion company? Why was I confused thinking it was a good idea? This is a mistake I really want you to pay attention to because a lot of you still make this. But we see a $1 billion company and we think we need to act like they are acting. So instead, what I want you to really do is recognize how big you are and behave in that way. Your activities around that. So an example is going to conferences. $1 billion firms have people who just can stand around at a conference. A friend of mine, bless his heart, a friend of mine works for a $1 billion company. His job is to just build relationships. He doesn't even champion an opportunity through. He's got colleagues who do that. Your job is to get out there, build the relationships, listen, just talk. Well, we can't do that as small businesses, but they can afford to pay him because the deals they go after are $250 million, over $1 billion. And so they're going after big opportunities. It is a wise move for them to put him out there because he has good relationships with DOD, for example. So what I see people doing, though, is we go to conferences thinking we're going to meet all these people instead of just picking up the phone. Almost every single day when I'm doing training or I'm talking with customer, I literally just go, well, you know what? It's faster. Just pick up the phone. And we pick up the phone and we call some KO or somebody and reach out and say hi. And that's what I want you to do. Don't go to events right now while you're small thinking you're going to meet a bunch of people. Go to events for the fun of it. But if you want to meet people, determine who you want to meet and then pick up the phone and call them. This next bullet I had was doing vanity projects, right? $1 billion firms can do vanity projects. And these are contracts or projects with showcase type customers or something that there's not a massive amount of value, but there's a lot of prestige maybe behind it. And I use this example as the White House. Literally, the reason I had the White House as a customer is because back then I thought it was a good idea. But when I got in there, I realized how hectic it was because the administration's change over. Also, I realized that, man, I just got into a customer that really doesn't spend a lot. Compared to if I go to the Army and I just keep growing and growing in the Army, I could build a $500 million company in the Army if I wanted to, and if I was that good, right? But they spend enough that I could get it from them. And so vanity projects are really important. Don't chase the contracts or vanity or contracts or projects because they look super cool on your capability statement or your website or something. Chase them because they give you relevant past performance. Chase them because they're in a target agency that can grow. Another huge one, and I've done multiple trainings on this, why smalls should never follow Shipley. If you don't know what Shipley is, don't Google it. Don't go look at it. But if you do know what Shipley is, it is a $1 billion company's process for sales in the federal market. When you look at it, you literally can see these things going forward. What I say is that if you know what a pink team and a black hat review is, then you're not a customer for me because you're thinking too big. You're way, way too big. That's a level of maturity that requires a big back office commitment. For most of us small businesses, you should just follow my 7-step process. I took the entire Shipley process, which is just basically industry's process, and put it into 7-step process for federal revenue success. Don't follow a process that is so convoluted that you spend so much time either trying to maintain that and manage it, or you just never even do it well. That was my problem, is we had Shipley all over our wall, but none of us really knew how to do it. We could talk a game, but it never integrated into what we did. You need to bring your processes down to the level you and your colleagues are at, and then you grow them as years go on. Networking in person, I kind of already mentioned. You don't need to network in person. Literally, I brought 100 plus people to you right now today in a live training. You can network with people. You can go back into, if you registered for today's training, you can go back in and find the people who were in there and say, hey, I missed you. I didn't get a chance to talk with you at Neil's training. Can we connect offline? Right? That happens. You can network online all day long. You don't need to go to a vendor outreach session or something like that to network. Most of society now is starting to go to virtual anyways. And the last thing is, when you act like $1 billion company, you start acting, you're diluted, right? So larges are so large that they can do multiple core competencies, cyber, cloud, data, et cetera, right? But smalls need to really focus on a niche and get good at it so you're known for it and you build relevant past performance. And then the same thing, larges can go after many agencies. That person I was saying I talked to earlier, I said, hey, just this one agency, just go after it. You're just trying to get a couple of million, drive forward, getting it here. And that focus will drive you towards the success. But when you get too far, looking at too many agencies, you dilute your chances for success. So make sure you're focused. Okay, here's the 2 things I want you to remember from today's training. First thing is, ask yourself if you're being busy or productive, right? It's the difference between activity and productivity. And you want to increase the productivity with you and your colleagues. And so all you have to do is look at what you're doing in the next hour and go, is this productive, right? And so you attending this training, by the way, is productive. You're learning something, but you're meeting potentially 5 or 10 new people. That's a good day. The second thing I want you to remember is that that you should embrace subcontracting. Prime contracting is not bad, but sometimes it's a siren song that we keep going there instead of realizing that 2 of the other revenue streams are subcontracting with largest and subcontracting with smalls. When you embrace that, you will see your success start going up. Hey, if you are interested in getting our help, we have a BD Accelerator workshop. It is for companies doing $1 million plus. We want to make sure you already have traction. We're going to accelerate you to the next level. But if you're interested in that workshop, you can put in workshop in the chat and Gus and I will follow up with you. Otherwise, for everybody, as you move forward, don't forget to register for training tomorrow. And remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.